Hey, I just saw Superman. No thoughts written down. I'm just gonna talk straight to the screen for however long I do so. Um, just right off the bat, it was a 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100 film. I know that's like recency bias or all of that, but I think it was really good. Um, I think it was awesome. I think I also actually got interviewed before I saw the film, funny enough, by this Northwestern kid. He was doing like maybe a paper thing with his professor. But then it's basically the same idea I talked to him about. I think very often in society now, what we do with movies is that we come into movies with a score of 100 and we subtract from that 100 as the movie goes on. See, like, oh, I didn't like this, I didn't like that. I think that's a weird approach to watch movies from because one, it implies you come into the movie with a perfect movie planned already. Like you have a vision for this movie. If it doesn't align with that, then the movie is bad or wherever, or it loses points. And then two, it's just like in your mind, your goal now is to criticize the movie. So you're not even trying to enjoy it. You're more so trying to see the flaws. Like you're trying to see where the movie falls short. And I think if you try and focus on that, then you're going to find that, right? I think a good analogy is like if you're too worried about failing, you're going to fail. Like if you're skiing down a mountain, you're worried about like, oh, you're going to hit the trees, and you focus only on the trees, you're eventually going to hit a tree. So I didn't do that. I just watched it. I was very excited. I was like cautious because like this is the movie I've been hyped up for like for the whole year, and it really delivered and did more than that. I would say. I think the best way to describe it, as the way it's being described now, is in two fashions. One is it's a movie of the Superman the animated series. I didn't watch it much, but I watched some episodes. I think that's accurate. But I think two, the other way, which I really like, is that if you took a Superman comic book, this movie is what follows up. But I even think I'll go a step farther and say if you shook a Superman comic book and then a movie fell out and you cleaned it and like brushed it up and made it even better, that's what you get with this movie. I think this movie does something a lot of superhero comic books haven't done in a long time, which is be a comic book movie. So often, I think comic book movies are produced by these studios that are trying to appeal to the most people, use the data and say, hey, we really want to get this group of people. We want to get like millennial moms. We want to get like Gen Z kids and Alabama and all that. Like they want to appeal to everyone. But I think in doing that, we've kind of lost the essence of comic book movies in themselves. And then saying like, okay, trying to detract from the comic books and make it more appealing to the average moviegoer. And this movie, I think, is still appealing to everyone. But I think what this movie does really well is I don't think it ever shies away from being a comic book movie. It takes the comic. It doesn't go to the origins. It just says, "Hey, we're starting at issue 5 we're starting at issue 1 or issue 5." Or let's say issue 1. We're starting issue 1 with this new Superman comic book series. The world is already built. We know superheroes exist. We know there's extra dimensions. You know there's flying dogs and all of that. And the movie just accepts it. It doesn't feel the need to explain everything. I really love that because that makes the world feel lived in. In contrast, it would be like if we were another approach. I think maybe super. I think superhero movies do too often is like they feel have to explain the world. So then maybe it's like let's say if you go to like the early stages of the MCU and you saw something like a flying dog, that would have to be reasoned with like, oh, what's the origin of the flying dog? How is this dog flying? All of that, and then it's like I get the appeal, like, oh, we wanted it to be grounded and all of that, but then I think it kind of just doesn't. I think I already know comic books. I already know Superman. I don't need to know the origin of crypto and why he can fly. I don't need to know how extra dimensions exist and all of that. I just want to enjoy the story for itself because there's so much in that comic book medium that you can do with a story once you have that freedom of your pen where it's like, okay, I can make extra dimensions a thing and continue to tell my story about how you should be a nicer person and not be scared to don't fall prey to the world in a sense and in its complexities and all that. I think that's a core theme of the movie. Um, I'm still processing it, but I think that's one of the core ideas. Another thing I really liked about the movie, it didn't like fall. It never. I don't think it was scary to actually make a comment about anything. And then I think this is where the whole political talk with this movie is coming from, and that people are saying a very small loud minority is saying, oh, this is maybe woke, too it's too political and all that. I don't think that's the case, but I think obviously I lean more progressive left and all that. And I think maybe that's maybe why I wasn't so appalled by it. But I think the movie is more so just like it's basic stuff. Like for example, there's people who do bad stuff in this movie, right? There's no debate about that. And the movie says, hey, that's not good. And that's pretty much the political stuff. But I think if you become so deeply ingrained in supporting one side or another, or supporting one person or another, or supporting one faction or group and another, and becomes like a sport to you, like politics does, then that's how you can see it being too woke, too political. It's more so just like, hey, this is a bad thing, and let's not do that bad thing. But I think in society now, that becomes way too complicated to say, okay, this is bad. Like, there obviously are nuances. I think the movie does touch on those in a pretty nice way. I don't think, but something I think is really nice is that the movie kind of easily have ignored those nuances and it said, hey, bad thing and that. But the movie actually makes it more realistic and grounded by saying, okay, it's a bit more nuanced than that. And then they obviously, like, there's clearly bad stuff that go on, like the evils that go on in this movie, like the character motivations are very simplistic. But I would argue that in the real world, in our world, in our society, that's also the case. Like, if someone's doing like a very bad thing, 9 out of 10 times, I doubt they have like the most thought out reasoning for why they're doing the bad thing. Like, it's probably something very childish, primitive, like, oh, I want more of this, right? Like, when you go down to the core of it. I think that's what I like about the movie, and I like about fictional stories as well. It's like very often they get clowned on for being like, oh, the villain's motivation is too simplistic. But like, often when someone does a bad thing, that is the case. Um, Man, Bo's good. Sometimes worried about with James Gunn. I don't think he has the best music taste. Like, I think sometimes it works, but he has like a more of a punk rock music taste, and sometimes it feels like it can ruin the show or the movie. For example, with I think it was Creature Commanders. I think that was definitely the case. Like, it didn't ruin it entirely, but I think the music definitely felt out of place and felt like kind of pushed or forced in. With this, I don't think that's the case. I think the music complemented the movie really well. The music and soundtrack were just awesome. The story was just so good, man. I was genuinely surprised because, like, even though I just spent like 2 3 minutes not complaining, but talking about how like it wasn't afraid to condemn stuff. I was like, dang, it wasn't actually afraid to do that. I think many movies are. Many movies would actually like they would abstract so much and obscure the whole situation just so they don't get caught up in any political thing. There's actually a moment in the movie, this is a spoiler, where Green Lantern says, "My oath does allow me to get involved in politics," which is obviously a joke and all that. But I do think it's like if people are dying, that's a, no, I'm just gonna leave that in its entire that whole conversation in this entirety. But I think it's so the movie handles it so well that I was really surprised. I was really enjoyed that. Besides the music, the story, I think the humor was also really good. I think often I think where superhero movies are in public discourse is that like the comedic aspects are a bit too much. In this movie, sometimes it does feel like it's putting its toe over the line. But I think overall, I did enjoy the comedy. It felt like a Superman who was making natural jokes. Like a lot of the jokes, I think even all the jokes never felt too forced. It just felt like I was laughing at them, man. And if I was laughing, I missed like it felt natural to the story. I never felt pulled out. Say, hey, the director or the scriptwriter wants to tell you this joke for no reason. I think it was handled really well. Emotional moments hit really well. I do think sometimes they'll cut a bit short, maybe like a couple seconds would have helped. But I think, like, to be fair, this is something I was thinking about. And maybe I'm being maybe I'm glazing this movie too much, or maybe I'm just too excited. But I think in real life, that's also what happens. Like in real life, stuff happen. Like if you have an emotional moment in real life, it's not like that emotional moment's gonna last 24 hours, right? Like that emotional moment, something has to happen. Like you have to go to the bathroom, you have to fart, you have to call someone, someone's texting you, or something's popped up in your phone. Stuff happen like in real life, and I feel like the comedic moments reflect that pretty well. It doesn't feel like, okay, let's just make a joke for making a joke sake of it, but it just feels like it felt more natural. I really enjoyed that aspect. So even going to that natural aspect, I know I touched on this a bit more with the whole commentary side of the movie, but I do think something I do really like is that while the movie brings out the best in comic books, it also allows it, how do I say this? It brings out the best elements in comic books, but also brings into the elements of stuff you can do in live action by adding that groundedness or that natural stuff in life, like some stuff like if a grass takes too long to open, that just feels natural, or maybe the conversations flow so well compared to comic books, which only have a limited space to tell dialogue, and the conversations don't flow as well. So I remember a big thing, a pet peeve for me actually, is when two people talk one on one. Like if I'm talking to someone in the movie, what often happens is I say my lines, they say their lines, and it just goes on like that. But I feel like with this movie, it felt very like it was natural. Like people cut people off, people talk at the same time. There was a great argument or conversation between Superman and Lois, and I was like, dang, that's great acting. Lex Luthor as a character was so amazing. Like in the second half of the film, especially, I was like, man, the first half even like, I think I don't like all parts of the movie and all characters were my favorite parts. But I feel like his acting and his character was just like it was just so fun. I think in decades to come, it'll still be a fun thing to watch. I know like when this comes out on streaming, it's gonna be memed very often just because like he's such a it's just a Lex Luthor character, but it's also so funny in the sense that it's Lex Luthor. It's not funny in the sense like, oh, let's make him comedic. It's like this is fully Lex Luthor, and he's doing stuff that's like Lex Luthor would do, and that's what the fun, that's where the comedy comes in. I also think it's really cool to see like how they use his money and how they use his awkward gestures. It's just really awesome. I think his name, the actor is like Nick, the actor of Lex Luthor in the movie is Nicholas Holt. He did a great job. David Corn Sweat, I'm forgetting the actor of Louis Lane. All of them did a great job. Just terrific all around. Mr. Terrific was also really cool. I love the way he fights. He has this really amazing action scene. I think that was really awesome. I know people are saying he should get like a movie or a show. I think that would be cool. But I think overall, this movie was meant to serve as the start for DC's new launch into a extended universe. I think it actually does it better. I think it did the one thing the DCU had failed at first. The one before this, the one led by Zack Snyder, I believe. That one, in essence, tried to replicate the flow of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I think fundamentally, DC and Marvel, while both comic book properties are very different, that DC has this rich repertoire of characters that are well known to the others due to successful shows and animated movies. I think they didn't take advantage of that, so they tried to start off small, like, oh, we have this superhero that we're gonna build out slow, like introducing 2 or 3 superheroes at a time. When it didn't make sense to do that at all, just like throw your audience into the DC universe and build from there. And I think that's what James Gunn has James Gunn has done with this movie, and it's just so awesome. You can see in the way like the stuff happened in the background. So sometimes we even see like Superman fight, and we're like, oh, Superman fought that character, that makes sense. Or the Justice Gang, Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, them, they did this thing, that makes sense because there's superheroes who exist in this universe. So it makes sense that stuff are happening. This is a spoiler as well, but like there's a moment in the film where they're fighting like this fifth dimensional imp or something, and that's not the plot of the movie, so it's not the focus. But it makes sense that that does happen because that's something that happens in comic books for a bunch of comic books where like there's some extraterrestrial being that people have to deal with. And I think it's really awesome that the movie takes that comic book element and says, hey, instead of making this like the core element of the film, we're going to live in the comic book and say, okay, this isn't the focus, but it's like a cool thing to make the world feel real, to feel lived in. I think that's probably my favorite part. The world just feels so lived in and it just feels so awesome. The world and the characters just feel so authentic and lived in. I really love that. But overall, I think it was a 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, 100 out of 100 film. Probably top 5, top 3 comic book movies. Just the pure fact that I think it brought comic book movie from the pages to life in such an amazing way. It did that and more. I think that's just really awesome. It's not something you see very often. So besides that, I have nothing else to say. So have a great day.